This is the Dive Into Discovery podcast, where curiosity meets insight, and every conversation uncovers a new layer of understanding.
Welcome to today's Dive Into Discovery. We're your hosts, Theo and Alex. And today we're going to be venturing into, I guess you could say, the fog-choked streets of Victorian London to explore a case that's both fascinating and horrifying.
A case that even after more than a century still captures our imaginations and sends shivers down our spines.
It's a puzzle with missing pieces.
A story that ends with a question mark.
Yeah, and it all plays out against this backdrop of Whitechapel in 1888.
Right.
Can you maybe just paint a picture for us of what life was like in this district?
Oh, yeah?
I imagined it wasn't all tea parties and crumpets.
It was far from it. Imagine a labyrinth of narrow, dimly lit streets teeming with people. Poverty was rampant. Sanitation was poor. Crime was a constant shadow. It was a place where people lived on the margins, often overlooked and undervalued by society.
And tragically, it was in this setting that 5 women, known as the Canonical Five, met their end. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, all victims of a brutal, calculated violence.
Yeah. What's striking about these murders isn't just the violence itself, but the precision of it. The mutilations, particularly the removal of organs, suggests a level of anatomical knowledge that wasn't common. And it fueled speculation that the killer might be a doctor, a butcher, or someone with a similar background.
Speaking of speculation, the police at the time must have been under immense pressure to solve this. No DNA testing, no CCTV cameras. It was essentially a game of shadows.
Absolutely. They were working with limited forensic techniques, relying heavily on witness statements, which were often conflicting or unreliable.
Right.
And then there were the letters.
Oh, yeah?
The infamous Dear Boss letter and the Saucy Jackie postcard.
Those letters, were they genuine communications from the killer or just someone kind of adding fuel to the fire?
Well, while they certainly added to the hysteria, most experts believe they were hoaxes, attempts to mislead the police or simply to grab attention. But one can't deny their impact. They helped shape the public perception of Jack the Ripper, turning him into this bogeyman lurking in the fog.
Adding to the pressure on the police was the double event, the murders of Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes on the same night. What can you tell us about that horrific night?
It showed a chilling escalation in the killer's audacity and efficiency.
Yeah.
Imagine the fear that gripped Whitechapel. 2 women murdered in a single night. The press had a field day.
Wow.
The public demanded answers. The police were scrambling, trying to piece together clues, chasing down every lead. But the killer remained elusive.
Over the years, there's been a long list of suspects.
Yeah.
Montague John Druitt, Aaron Kosminski, Walter Sickert, and even a royal Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence.
Right.
It's like a morbid game of Clue.
It really is.
Is there any one suspect that stands out as more likely than the others?
Well, that's the heart of the mystery, isn't it? Despite all the research and speculation, there's no smoking gun.
Yeah.
Each suspect has their proponents and their detractors. For example, Montague John Druitt, a barrister who committed suicide shortly after the last canonical murder, was a suspect favored by some early investigators. However, the evidence linking him to the crimes is largely circumstantial.
So while the mystery of Jack the Ripper's identity endures, let's maybe shift our focus a little bit to the victims.
Okay.
These were real women with lives and stories that often get overshadowed by the sensationalism of the case.
You're absolutely right. It's easy to get lost in the puzzle, but we can't forget the human cost. These were women trying to survive in a harsh and unforgiving world.
Right.
Their stories are essential, not just as pieces of a puzzle, but as reminders of the vulnerability of women in that era, particularly those living in poverty.
Yeah. It makes you wonder if these murders had happened in maybe a more affluent part of London, would the investigation have been handled differently? Would there have been more urgency, more resources dedicated to finding the killer?
That's a difficult question, but it's certainly worth pondering. The social context of Whitechapel, the poverty, the crime, the perception of these women as quote-unquote fallen or undesirable undoubtedly played a role in how the case was perceived and investigated.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that justice isn't always blind, that societal biases can and do influence the course of investigations.
Precisely. And it underscores the importance of understanding the historical context, not just the who and the what, but the why. Why were these women so vulnerable? Why did the killer choose to prey on them? These are questions that continue to haunt us even today.
And as we delve deeper into this case, we'll uncover more of those haunting questions, peeling back the layers of history and trying to make sense of the senseless. But for now, let's maybe just pause and reflect on the lives lost, the fear that gripped Whitechapel, and the enduring mystery that continues to captivate us.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a case that forces us to confront not only the brutality of the past, but also the uncomfortable truths about social inequality and how it shapes our perceptions of justice.
You mentioned earlier that the killer's methods, particularly the mutilations, suggested a certain level of anatomical knowledge. Does this lead investigators to focus on any specific professions?
Oh, yeah. Several suspects were considered because of their occupations.
Okay.
Butchers, surgeons, even those who worked in slaughterhouses. The precision of the cuts, the removal of organs seemed to point to someone familiar with the human body.
And what about the psychological profile of Jack the Ripper? Can we glean anything from, the nature of the crimes, the choice of victims?
Well, profiling was in its infancy back then, but even today, piecing together a psychological profile based solely on the crimes is tricky.
Right.
Some believe he was driven by misogyny, a hatred of women. Others suggest a sadistic pleasure in inflicting pain and terror.
Some have even theorized like a ritualistic element to the murders, pointing to the specific organs that were removed.
That's right. The removal of the uterus in some cases has led to speculation about a possible connection to fertility rituals or even some sort of twisted medical experimentation. But it's important to remember that these are just theories. We lack the definitive proof needed to connect any of these motives to a specific individual.
So we have a puzzle with, like, many pieces missing. But let's talk about the pieces we do have. Modern forensic techniques have been applied to the case.
Right.
Has DNA testing or any other analysis provided any conclusive answers?
Well, there have been attempts to extract DNA from evidence found at the crime scenes, like the shawl supposedly belonging to Catherine Eddowes.
Yeah.
But the results have been controversial, with some experts questioning the reliability of the samples due to contamination and degradation over time.
It seems like every step forward in this case is met with 2 steps back.
Yeah, it's the nature of cold cases, especially one as old and complex as this one. But that doesn't mean we should stop searching for answers. New technologies are constantly emerging, and perhaps someday we'll have the tools to definitively solve this mystery.
Or perhaps the answer lies not in science, but in a fresh perspective on the existing evidence. Maybe there's a clue hidden in plain sight, something overlooked by generations of investigators.
That's always a possibility. Sometimes all it takes is a new set of eyes. A different way of looking at the evidence to, break open a case. And with Jack the Ripper, there's no shortage of people willing to take on the challenge.
Yeah, the case seems to have, an almost magnetic pull on researchers, historians, and armchair detectives alike.
It's the ultimate unsolved mystery, isn't it? A puzzle that seems solvable yet remains elusive.
Yeah.
It speaks to our desire for order, for closure, for an explanation for the inexplicable.
And perhaps, in the end, that's what keeps us coming back to Jack the Ripper. Not just the horror of the crimes, but the enduring mystery of it all, the unanswered questions that echo through time.
Exactly. We're drawn to the unknown, to the shadows. We want to know what lurks there, even if it terrifies us.
And in a way, the unsolved nature of the case has allowed Jack the Ripper to become, almost a mythical figure. He's become a symbol, a representation of something larger than himself.
You could say that.
Yeah.
He represents the dark underbelly of Victorian society, the fear that lurked beneath the surface of respectability. He's a cautionary tale. A reminder that even in the most civilized of societies, darkness can find a foothold.
Let's imagine for a moment that Jack the Ripper were active in today's world, with all our surveillance technology, our advanced forensic capabilities. Would he have been caught?
Oh, that's an intriguing thought experiment. On the one hand, you'd think it would be nearly impossible to get away with such crimes in our modern, hyper-connected world. But then again, we've seen time and again that even with all our technology, even the most sophisticated criminals can sometimes slip through the cracks.
It makes you wonder if there's something about the human psyche, a capacity for darkness that transcends time and technology. That even in a world bathed in light, there will always be shadows lurking in the corners.
And those shadows will always hold a certain allure, won't they? The thrill of the unknown, the challenge of the unsolved. As long as there are mysteries, there will be those who seek to unravel them.
And so, the legend of Jack the Ripper continues to fascinate and terrify. But amidst the intrigue and the speculation, it's crucial to remember the human cost. Lives lost, the families shattered, and the fear that gripped the community.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that behind every true crime story, behind every mystery, there are real people who suffered, whose lives were forever changed by the events that unfolded.
And their stories deserve to be remembered, not just as footnotes in a sensational case, but as individuals who were loved, who had hopes and dreams, and whose lives were tragically cut short. This is a sobering thought, and a reminder that even as we explore the darker corners of history, we should do so with empathy and respect for those whose lives were touched by these events.
Yeah, it's a balance we must strike. The fascination with true crime is undeniable, but we can't allow the sensationalism to overshadow the human element.
It's interesting to think about how the Jack the Ripper case has impacted our culture. It's inspired countless books, movies, even walking tours of Whitechapel. It's almost become a genre unto itself.
It's true. The case has become a touchstone in popular culture, a shorthand for unsolved mystery and Victorian-era terror. But it also serves as a reminder of the power of fear, how it can grip a community and shape perceptions.
And speaking of fear, the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee was formed by concerned citizens who felt the police weren't doing enough to protect them. What can you tell us about this group?
Well, the committee, formed by local businessmen, reflects the anxieties of the time. They organized patrols, offered rewards, and even hired private detectives. They were ordinary people trying to take control in a situation where they felt powerless.
It speaks to, a sense of community, a willingness to step up when the authorities seemed unable to provide adequate protection.
Absolutely. And it also highlights the tension between public perception and the realities of police work. The police were often criticized for their handling of the case, but they faced immense challenges: limited resources, unreliable witnesses, and a constant pressure from the press and the public.
It's like trying to assemble a jigsaw puzzle in the dark. You know the pieces are there, but you can't quite make them fit.
And that's perhaps the most enduring legacy of Jack the Ripper. The unanswered questions, the tantalizing clues that lead nowhere, the enduring mystery that continues to fascinate and frustrate in equal measure.
So as we reach the end of our deep dive here, what are some of the key takeaways, the lasting impressions that we should carry with us?
Well, for me, it's the importance of understanding the social context of a crime. The case of Jack the Ripper is not just about a series of brutal murders. It's about the lives of the victims, the fears of a community, and the limitations of justice in a time of social upheaval.
It's also a reminder that even in the face of horrific acts, the human spirit can endure. The people of Whitechapel didn't simply cower in fear. They organized, they demanded action, they tried to protect their own.
And on a more practical level, the case highlights the crucial role of forensic science in criminal investigation. While technology has advanced tremendously since 1888, the core principles of evidence gathering, analysis, and interpretation remain essential.
Yeah. And perhaps the most important takeaway of all is that some mysteries may never be fully solved. We may never know definitively who Jack the Ripper was, but the quest for understanding, the exploration of the evidence, the examination of the historical context is a valuable endeavor in itself.
Indeed, it's a reminder that the search for truth is often a journey, not a destination. And sometimes the journey itself is where we find the most profound insights.
So if you're intrigued by this case, I encourage you to continue your own deep dive. Explore the many books, documentaries, and resources available. Walk the streets of Whitechapel if you ever get the chance. You might just uncover a new piece of the puzzle, or at the very least gain a deeper appreciation for the enduring mystery of Jack the Ripper.
And who knows? Maybe someday with new technology or a fresh perspective, the fog that surrounds this case will finally lift, revealing the truth that has eluded us for so long. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the light on.
What did you think of this week's episode? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to join us next time as we dive even deeper. And as always, stay curious, because you never know what discoveries are just around the corner.